city of fun.
Summer camp.
I'm just trying to regulate my body temperature.
Right?
It is
like
hot.
Freezing in here,
Yeah,
boiling outside.
I can't figure it out.
I know. You just have to go inside, outside, inside, outside. Maybe the pool's the best spot, I don't know.
Well, I go outside to thaw, and then I come back inside to cool off a little bit in the igloo.
That's right. There's probably a security story in there somewhere.
Probably. We can make one up.
We can make one up. It's good to meet you, man.
Likewise.
Glad to have you on, and you hear all about the Intel 471 story.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we'll start with a little bit about your role and what you're up to, and then a snippet of what Intel 471 does.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm President and Chief Intel Officer at Intel 471. We're a cyber threat intelligence company. Our bread and butter is getting deep, embedded access into adversaries where they communicate, where they talk, really all about trying to provide that pre-attack intelligence to our customers so they can be proactive and understand the adversary better and take proactive defensive measures.
Nice. So there's a 3 words. And I just forgot them.
Pre-attack
intelligence. There we go.
Yeah.
Pre-attack. So that seems really cool to me. I'm going to come back to that, but there's a word that's been used a lot in security. Proactive.
How about actionable?
And actionable. So I want to go there first, if you don't mind, and because I think people might hear that and say,
Yeah, it's a bit of a buzzword.
I know we're supposed to be proactive. What does that really mean? So maybe a definition of proactive from your perspective, and is it what people think it is, or is it something different based on what you?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a bit of a buzzword that gets thrown around quite a bit. I'm sure you walk the floor at Black Hat, you're going to see it quite a bit, probably alongside AI and Agentic and all of those fun words.
Yeah.
For us, it really means, going beyond the IOCs, going beyond indicators, which are really ephemeral and temporary, and more focusing on the adversary behaviors. So really understanding who the adversaries are. I look at the threat landscape like a battlefield, kind of like a war. We're fighting a war as defenders, and really it's about how can I counter the adversary's attacks against me, and really the best way to do that is to go behind enemy lines and really become intimately familiar with who you're up against. And that means understanding not just the tools that they're using. Of course, indicators are important because we have to block those, but really start to understand what their intentions are, their capabilities, what their motivations are, so that I can understand whether truly I'm at risk and I'm a target.
Right. So, pre-attack intelligence, maybe unpack that a bit as well, because you talk about knowing what their intent is. And just doing stuff doesn't necessarily expose intent, I'm going to guess. That's right. So how do you find that, and how do you use that to get to the pre-attack intelligence?
There's a couple ways. I mean, let me just start by saying, so we focus predominantly on the financially motivated cyber underground.
Okay.
And speaking of buzzwords, you'll hear all about the deep and dark web, and we don't typically use that because it's sort of nebulous and it kind of denotes this hard to reach space that no one really understands. But in fact, it's quite organized, and sure, there was millions upon millions of handles out there and lots of noise, but really when it comes down to it, you're really dealing with a structured ecosystem of financially motivated cybercrime. You have services that are enabling cybercrime. You've got certainly the individual actors who are conducting attacks, but really our job, our mission at Intel 471 is to enumerate and map out that space. And when you do that, you realize there's really, it's not nebulous, it's not deep, and it's not dark. So once you do that, once you map out this space, then you start to become more intimately familiar with who these adversaries are. And so a good example might be like, so everybody knows ransomware. Ransomware's been around for a long, long time. A lot of ransomware groups have sprung up over the years, new ones, new branding, but a lot of these ransomware groups consist of former operators of ransomware groups that have disbanded in the past.
Okay,
and so they kind of
switch jobs.
And what happens, it's human behavior, right, to continue on doing what works. And so if a behavior or a technique works by one adversary, really doesn't matter which ransomware group they fall into. They're gonna carry on those same behaviors and those techniques. And so we track the actors themselves and the behaviors of those actors, so that when they do make a change into a new ransomware group, or they're operating on their own maybe, their behaviors still remain the same. And so that might impact the way you, say for instance, do threat hunting operations. So the way I hunt for that adversary is going to be the same, whether that adversary is part of ransomware group A or ransomware group B.
Right. So, not dark, not deep.
That's right.
Still mysterious, maybe a little bit.
It's a little bit mysterious.
But not a place organizations really should go. They should look for a partner who has access and an understanding and the ability to be in there and look for the right things.
That's right.
So tell me a little bit about how that works and what you bring back to the organization then, so they don't have to do that work.
That's right. Well, it's a gray area. You're right. It's mysterious, and organizations don't want to take on the risk of operating in that gray area themselves. That's number one. Number two is it takes expertise. It takes native language proficiency, because a lot of these actor communities and networks are Russian speaking or Chinese speaking, or languages that our organizations, they just are not equipped to understand what's going on. And so and then also it takes some cultural understanding and understanding the nomenclature of how actors talk. It's a totally, it's a different slang, it's a different language.
It's just like the kids with the emojis, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's like me trying to understand what my teenage girls are talking about on their text threads, right? And so that's the kind of visibility and capability that we offer. We have researchers all over the world who have that native language proficiency and understanding, cultural understanding, that really gets us, and here's the key, it gets us as close as we possibly can to the adversary, to elicit that kind of really rich behavioral insights that organizations that we support and we partner with really rely on, to understand those behaviors and be able to act on those preemptively.
So how do those behaviors surface as tools or tactics or techniques that, do you flag them as things that organizations should pay attention to, or you just surface it and then they have to kind of figure out what?
Yeah, no, great question. I already mentioned threat hunt. Right. So one really great way to operationalize this kind of threat intelligence is by doing hunting operations that are targeting those specific behaviors the actors deploy. Another one could be, everything that we do, we map to the MITRE framework, right? Okay. So all of these techniques are mapped to the MITRE framework. As an organization consuming that intel, I can start doing some threat profiling to understand which actors might be more of a threat to me than others. So it helps with prioritization. I'm not having to deal with all of this noise over here. I can just focus on these techniques and these actors. Another one is, exposure. So we offer an attack surface and third-party risk solution to our customers, and this really helps to, let's say, I'm an organization that's scanning my attack surface and I find internet-facing vulnerabilities. Well, I also want to know who are the threat actors out there that are discussing those vulnerabilities, and is this truly something that I need to raise to the top of the priority list? So it's a combination. There's many more, but that's a combination of the things that work for our organizations that we support.
So probably have some really cool conversations with analysts. What about people at the security operations management layer, CISOs? Do you get to have a chance with them as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are those conversations sound like?
Yeah, well, how can I be more proactive? I mean, really, it starts there.
Are there things like specific things, like we want to bring our, I don't know, what are they measured on? Mean time to detection, mean time to response?
100%.
Is that the kind of stuff?
Yeah, mean time to response is a big one. Prioritization I mentioned just a minute ago, that kind of embeds into that. So, if I'm focusing on all of these alerts that take up a lot of my, absorb 50-60% of my time, I want to make sure I'm spending the right time on the right stuff. So. Helping organizations, this is what threat intel does. When you have decision grade intelligence, it really should inform the rest of your security operations and really wherever you're using threat intel across your business to help you prioritize and make your job more efficient. And that's, we have integrations that, provide our intelligence downstream directly into analyst workflows to make things as seamless as possible. When I talk to CISOs, that's really what it comes down to: efficiency gains. How can I improve my mean time to respond, mean time to detect? And so that's ultimately the goal, the business goal that we're trying to achieve for our customers.
Right. So the world of tech has changed dramatically in the last couple of years, and certainly the adversaries are using tools now that can scale.
That's
right. How do you help organizations counter that scale and the volume perhaps that they're seeing?
Yeah, and I would say, the barrier, we say this, I feel like every year, but the barrier of entry is so low for actors to just come on the scene and be able to deploy, pretty wide scale, impactful attacks against organizations these days. I would even go so far as to say that the barrier of entry is it's nothing now.
Right.
With AI, and even before before AI hit on the scene, there were services in the underground that really enabled these. There are dedicated services and products in the underground marketplace that threat actors can just use and deploy at their will. So again, it's you can look at the IOCs and you can look at the telemetry and try to protect yourself in a more defensive, reactive posture. But what we try to do is get ahead of that and say, hey, look, we're tracking this new malware as a service. We have early samples of the malware that's being offered by this actor because we have that placement and we have that access to give our customers a head start on what they could expect as that malware as a service grows.
Right. So decision grade, is that what you said?
Decision grade intelligence.
Yeah. It's all about making decisions quickly, right?
That's
With confidence, I think, is also important. Maybe as we wrap, is there a story or two from a customer where you helped them make a decision that could have been, I'll say, life or death for their business, or certainly, seriously impactful?
Well, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but this is a daily occurrence for us. Recently, we found an insider. Actually, two separate organizations had an insider that we helped them with. They had some indications based on their own monitoring internally that something weird was happening, and so they asked us to support, and we ended up finding and locating an insider.
The insider was connected outside as well?
That's right, yeah. Okay. They were trying to earn a profit by sharing some internal sensitive stuff. Okay. Another one is, initial access brokers. Credential theft and initial access using credentials is still a basic hygiene problem, but it's there. That's how threat actors are getting in still, even in the age of AI. And so, one of the things that we're constantly doing is monitoring the initial access broker space. And a lot of these initial access brokers will be feeders into ransomware, right? So there's downstream impact. And so initial access brokers would come out and they'll say, we've got access to all of these, compromised credentials. Do you want to buy them? We'll share them with you. And you might not believe this, but threat actors lie.
Really?
And they embellish. Yeah, criminals lie. It's pretty, astounding fact. But, one of our jobs is to, using our placement and access, is to validate that.
Right.
Maybe this is a Russian language actor, and organizations are just seeing it maybe on a forum, and they're like, maybe I'm impacted, maybe I'm not. Can you help us with that? And so we can go in.
Or a diversion. Or
that's right. Or it could be a completely different. So one of my favorite things is when we're able to validate that for them and actually say, no, it's not your organization. The criminal was lying, or he was wrong, or so now they can move on to something that's more impactful for them.
I just want to dig into so much more. We only have a couple seconds left, though. How about a call to action to CISOs and security leaders who, maybe a lot of companies think they need to be mature enough to take in intelligence and actually do something with it. I feel we've come a long way, and it's almost a fundamental element to security operations. So maybe a word to the CISOs who might have a misunderstanding of where that might sit in their program.
I would say, and this is maybe, so not directly related to Intel, but just a note on AI, right? So the AI hype is real. We're investing in AI ourselves. AI is a real thing. Agentic AI is going to be amazing for us, as we're already seeing on the defender side, producing amazing results. However, I would say basic hygiene is still a big problem. credentials, identity, internet-facing vulnerabilities, leaving remote access tools open to the internet. These are things that, again, as we talk about lowering the barrier of entry and becoming a hard target, right? Organizations want to become a hard target. As you're focusing on AI, as we all should, don't skimp out on the basics.
You're seeing a lot of stuff.
That's right.
Yeah. Cool. Well, good advice, Michael.
All right. I think I've thawed out a little bit talking, so it's good.
I'm thawed out a little as well. So,
all right.
Great conversation, and appreciate all that you're doing. Connect with Michael and the Intel 471 team. Get your own intelligence from this crew, pre-attack intelligence, so you can make decisions that stick, that matter, with confidence. All that.
It's great.
That work?
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Stay tuned for more here on ITSP Magazine.